Good evening and welcome to the very first of this kind of conversation that we will be having with Pastor Itua Ighodalo sitting right beside me here. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Now, on this particular edition of this Google Hangout, we had decided that we wanted to get an understanding of a balancing act. People hear of balancing act and they think of those guys who walk on a tight rope, on a tight wire, and they're there going that way, trying to make sure they don't tilt too much to the right or to the left. So the essence of this conversation is not just a balancing act, but what are you balancing? There is home, there is church, and then there is work. On a daily basis, you have to cope with all of these things. But we've got quite a few people who have joined, and I'm absolutely certain other people will join in this hangout as we go on. But very quickly, let me introduce the people we already have on the hangout. We have Alima. Alima, how are you?
I'm good. Alima is fine.
Excellent. And then we've got Favor in there as well. Favor, hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name
Okay, we know the Favor is there. Then we've got Larry as well joining in. Larry, how are you?
Hi, Pastor, and hi, Kaide.
Good. And then we've got Mark. Mark, hello. Good evening.
So good evening. How are you doing?
Yes, and then we've got Nda. Nda, you there? Can you hear me? Nda?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening.
Okay, good. Good evening. We just want to be sure that all those who have joined, and I understand there are a few people who want to join and who are looking to join us, but if you're looking to join us, you're watching us online now, all you need to do, the easiest way to access this conversation will be for you to go to www.trinityhousemg.com.org, and you will find an icon there which is Channels TV, and you can click on Talk Time. You will be able to join this hangout. So we'll start. Let me have the first throw of the dice. Balancing act, balancing home, work, and church. Let's start with the one that concerns you the most. You had a church, Trinity House, and you know that most churches, most of the time, they want people to come to church, which means that they have to sacrifice something to be in the presence of God in church. And at the same time, they have a home, they've got to take care of wife and children, and they also have to go to work. What will be the first trick in balancing all of this so that none of these three things that are really critical to our existence on earth, what's the first thing that people must understand?
You know, life starts with having a full understanding of who you are and who God created you to be, and working fully in your purpose. Okay? And the most important relationship is your relationship with God. So what I generally advise is not just coming to church. You must find time every day to spend some quality time with God, at least an hour in the morning. We do something in Trinity House, we call it command the morning. You give your morning an instruction, and you tell the rest of the day what you want it to do.
You give your morning an instruction.
Yes.
You personalize your morning, you give it a name, and you say, morning.
This is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do this morning. This is what I want this morning to become. This is what I want this day to become. And believe me sincerely, it works.
It works.
It does work. Your
Like
day
miracle.
starts to go like clockwork,
Okay.
because you have commanded the morning. So when you've done that, then you need to give your work or your job, which hopefully, if you are passionate about, shouldn't be too much stress. You need to give it quality time. Average time of 8 hours at your job. Then after that, you need to spend at least another 5 hours with your family, okay, and then another hour or two with God. And then you can call it a day and spend another 5, 6, 8 hours resting, because the body needs rest. Okay? Then you need to devote at least one day a week to God. 1 day a week to God. and that day typically is like a Sunday. You start off, typically I start off my Sundays from about 4 or 5 a.m. I spend 2-3 hours in God's presence. Then I'm into church for 7, and I run through church till about 12:30. And then I do some counseling, and then I do some home visitation. Well, that's me. I won't recommend that for you.
It does not work for anybody unless you're called to ministry.
Yeah, it may not work for you. But on the average, I like somebody to devote at least 3-4 hours on a Sunday to God. 1 hour personal, another 2.5 to 3 hours with God's people. Okay. If you're able to do that, then you can take your family home for a good brunch or something, and then spend the rest of the day at the beach, taking life easy, calming down, preparing for the next week, and so on and so forth. And then typically midweek, we'd like you to come and spend another 2 hours in God's presence, okay? And then in between, if you can squeeze another 2 hours, then you've done a good thing.
Another 2 hours in church as well, or another 2 hours outside of church?
Well, what we typically would like is 4 hours, 3-4 hours on Sunday, 2 hours midweek, like on Wednesday, then in between another 2 hours doing something for God. It could be ministry work, it could be evangelizing, it could be feeding the poor, it could be choir, it could be something, yes. Then I think you've had a full, nice week with God.
Excellent.
But then you must do your day 1 hour every day in the morning, and then maybe half an hour before you sleep. That would be fantastic.
Okay, so that sounds like a good way to keep balancing the 3 most critical aspects of our lives and making sure that the week is robustly taken care of. Now, let me start by asking Halima, what would be the first question that you will want to ask Pastor Itua Ighodalo tonight?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I would love to ask him, good evening everybody, what his advice would be for families where the father goes to one church and the mother goes to another church. How do you balance that between the kids when you have kids in that kind of family?
That's a very, very good question, okay? Let's not even start with church. Sometimes you have families where they're two different faiths entirely, okay? One is probably Muslim, one is probably Christian, and so on and so forth. And how do you sort of balance that within the kids? It's a tough one, especially if both are very strong and very insistent on their own mode of worship. Maybe the way is to do Fridays you go to the mosque, Saturdays you go to church, at least for a while, until the children decide which faith they would prefer. But then to answer your specific question, usually as a pastor, we try to encourage families to worship together, pray together, worship together, be in the same church. But sometimes you'll find that for one reason or the other, the father prefers a certain church, the mother prefers another one. You'll find it depends again on the age of the children. If they're really young, we sometimes sort of advise that they go with the mom, if they're really young. But then by the time they're a bit older, then they take their own decisions, as it were. But ideally, it'd be nice for the entire family to worship in the same church.
Okay, do you have a follow-on question to that, Halima?
Yeah, I'd like to know. A couple of days ago, the Pope had a pronouncement on marriages and divorce. I'd like to know his stance, pastor's stance on what the Pope said.
Okay. What did the Pope say? I didn't hear him. He didn't call me.
He mentioned that
He forgot my number. What did
okay, his stance was that it is morally right for some marriages for you to get a divorce when the parents, rather, the way you put it, it's like it's morally right for divorces to happen so that both parents stay on the moral path.
That's interesting. That's a huge departure from the traditional Catholic faith. You know, traditionally Catholics don't believe in divorce. As a matter of fact, what they eventually have is what you call an annulment of the marriage. That was the way out because they didn't really believe that marriages should break up. Okay, so the annulment now treats the marriage as though it never existed. for one reason or the other. Okay, so for the Pope to be talking about moral platforms for divorce means that there's a departure or there's a change in the traditional Catholic faith as far as I know. And I think it must be a response to the pressure of today's world. It's a lot of pressure in today's world, and a lot of the times we make mistakes. But as far as I'm concerned, we generally don't believe in or encourage divorce, except on certain grounds. Number one, if it's life-threatening. If it's life-threatening, if the union is life-threatening. Number two, if there's proven adultery, according to the Bible, according to the scriptures. But then, if people then insist on leaving the marriage, like Paul says, if an unbeliever or unbelieving wife or husband insists on leaving the marriage, then you let them go. But typically what we try to do is to work very, very hard to put the marriage together, because the Bible says that all things work together for good. But then again, realistically, some marriages were not well formed ab initio or well established ab initio, established for wrong reasons. And typically a lot of us, including pastors, don't actually understand the meaning of marriage, the importance of marriage, the prerequisites of marriage before people get into marriage. So sometimes marriages are flawed from day one, and very, very difficult for them to put together again. In that case, if divorce is the only option to save people's sanity, their health, their mental state, and their minds and their lives, what can you do?
So before I move to the next person, just follow on from what Alima just said there. When you said life-threatening, who decide if a relationship has become life-threatening?
Well, the lawyers have something they call the innocent bystander. If every day somebody is drawing out a knife and threatening to kill somebody, if every day somebody has black eyes and somebody is being really beaten and so on and so forth, if every day people say they cannot sleep because they don't know what's going to happen to them next, then it becomes life-threatening. There have been occasions like that. And so, and just in Lagos about 4 or 5 years ago, a husband actually is reputed or to have slaughtered or killed his wife or something. And it's not just the first time. It's happened a lot of the times. Some marriages, some couples are so violent and so aggressive that if we're not careful, there might be a threat to life. And a lot of those things come before either the judge or the pastor or somebody or the other. And if it's happened once, 2, 3 times, and it's just irreconcilable, then
it will be good for them to find ways of separating themselves and moving on.
Okay. Even if it's initially for a season until they're mature, because sometimes some of these things is based on immaturity and not really having a strong enough relationship with God. Okay. But sometimes it becomes permanent.
All right, let me go to the end of the list of people we've got who have joined us at the moment. Let me ask Nda, what would you want the pastor to explain to you in terms of balancing home, work, and church?
Hello.
Yes, Nda. What will be your question for Pastor?
Okay, can you take the question? Okay.
No, I'm not asking questions.
Balancing home and church, right?
Do you have a question you'd like to ask Pastor Itua?
Okay. Okay, yes. The first time I saw Pastor, I never knew he was a pastor then. I just saw him as a motivational speaker. And then I started reading about him, and I knew he was a pastor, and I was amazed at the wealth of the things that he says. I want to ask, what is one mistake that you witness leaders make more frequently when they come into leadership positions?
Say that again. One mistake, what?
What is one mistake you witness that leaders make when they come into leadership positions, when they gain leadership positions?
One of the biggest challenges of leadership in Nigeria and also in the world is that leaders tend to want to arrogate and they become unapproachable, they become a little bit arrogant. They don't want to be criticized or questioned, and sometimes they're intolerant or suggestions that are not in line with their thinking. It's a huge mistake. It happens even in church. It happens with leadership in church. It happens with leadership in secular world. And after a while, the leader cannot be spoken to, and everybody's afraid of the leader. They're afraid of their positions, or they're afraid of their jobs, and the leader leads people on a path of mistakes. So it's one of the mistakes leaders make a lot. They don't like to be criticized. It takes a lot to get a person to accept criticism. And anybody who is not ready to accept criticism is not ready to learn. Anybody who is not ready to learn is preparing to fail. And anybody preparing to fail will eventually fail. So there must be some level of humility in leadership and willingness to serve.
Now, if I can follow on from what he's just said, that humility, is it something that comes naturally? Or is it something that some people who are not Christian will be thinking you expect it to be, oh, God-given or spiritually driven?
Well, humility is not too natural with people. And that is why God keeps on saying, be ye humble, because I, the Lord thy God, am your God, and so on and so forth. Because if you look at Maslow's triangle, there's that aspiration by the man to want to dominate, or by the woman to want to be in charge. It comes from Genesis chapter 2, where God says, dominate the world, rule the world, take control, have dominion over the best beast of the earth, and all that and all that. The average human being takes that into his own world also. So there's competition. You want to be on top, you want to be in charge, you want to show, look at what I've done, see what I've achieved, see what I've become. And the more you do that, the less you are teachable, and the more mistakes you begin to make after a while.
Okay, Favor, your turn. What's your question for Pastor Itua?
Good evening, Pastor Itua.
Good evening. How are you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm very well, sir. Okay. My name is Anu Mayaki, actually, but I'm using something else. I have two questions. One of them is I work with teenagers in the church, and we found that a lot of these teenagers, they are not in the right way, in the sense that you tell them A and nothing seems to follow up in the house. So basically you tell them you need to pray to God every day, but then they come and they tell you, oh, my parents don't pray to God, why should I do it? Now that makes me think there's something fundamentally wrong with the family. Why do families or parents find it difficult to do these things that seem to be basic?
That's a very good question, and thank you for asking that question. You know, life is tough. I was saying to somebody recently, we're driving through Lagos, and we're driving from traffic to traffic to traffic, and I said the quality of life in Lagos is really, really, really very tough. So there are many reasons. Number one, no, people don't have full understanding of what life is all about, and relationship with God, and spending time with God. Number two, the devil is alive and well and tries very hard to break your relationship with God. So there are many times when we've done a vigil in church, and in the vigil people begin to sleep off and all that. And as soon as you finish the vigil, chat, everybody's talking. It's easier to talk and chat and gossip than to spend time praying to God. It's the devil that's alive and well. And then number three, parents themselves have not locked themselves very strongly into this concept of God. So there's something systematically wrong that we pastors and the church really has to face. And that's a very good observation, Anu. And seriously, we'll try and work on it to help everybody along.
So what is it that people should be doing then, so that whatever people are learning from church is taken home and not forgotten once you step outside the church, especially with children?
We have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. It's been proven that you need to repeat something to somebody 5 to 7 times before they actually get the grasp of it and it becomes part of their lives. Okay, so we just have to keep re-emphasizing things to people and keep hoping that you can encourage them and help them and push them. But God has his own mechanism in that he brings trouble their way. So, so I've seen a lot of people, you know, there's even a gentleman that I'm working with right now. As far back as 7 years ago, he had a little problem, came to me, I helped him, we prayed, the problem was solved, he disappeared. Then 2 years after, he came back, another problem had come, we prayed, problem was solved, disappeared. Now there's big problem, and I say if you disappear again, it's going to be tough for you. So he now says, now I'm now ready, I'm now ready, I'm now ready. So that's why sometimes trouble comes people's way, like Jonah. You know, people don't come to God easy. You know, I didn't come to God easy. I went through hell and high water. You know, and it's unfortunate that most people have to go through that level of pain. When most of the time God says, I'm standing on the door of your heart and I'm knocking. And you don't come because things seem okay. Now, when challenges come, and that's why we have challenges, either because you've broken a rule, okay, rightly or wrongly, you break a rule, you break the hedge, the serpent will come. Or God is trying to draw your attention so that you can spend a bit more time with him.
So will those people who think that in the developed world, because they seem to have it easy, that's why it's difficult for them to actually have the same passion for God or desire for church as you see in places like Nigeria where churches are packed full every Sunday?
Yeah, it's a challenge of the environment. And in the first world, or whatever you call it, they had their own challenges. You know, the Renaissance started off in Europe. You know, where things were tough, illnesses, the Black Plague, all sorts of things. So people turned to God. Now God has solved their problems, given them a very, very nice society, and now they've turned away from God. Now in America, they've taken prayer literally out of the curriculum in schools, okay, and that was a big brouhaha a couple of years ago. But they don't now realize, because there's science, that they still have a lot of challenges. You know, where in the world will a 15-year-old boy just walk into a church, carry a gun, and shoot 8-10 people and just kill them? That's something wrong somewhere, okay? Road rage is in America, it's in Europe. The highest amount of drug abuse is in Europe, is in America. The highest amount of mental health, emotional instability is in Europe, is in America. And what they all now think is that that's how life should be. But that's another set of challenges that overdevelopment has brought about. But it's also demonic influence. Okay? In Bible school, we learned about depression, suppression, oppression, and emotional instability is usually a demonic attack that's behind most of these things. But if you say that now to educated people, they say, there are no demons.
There's no demon.
Well, demons are alive and well. They speak French, they speak English, they speak Igbo, they speak Yoruba. They speak, they're colloquial, they're beautiful, they're very, very lovely, they're very educated. I mean, there's all over the place.
Okay. All right. Mark, your question. Let's go to Mark.
Sir?
Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm very fine, sir. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Akin, Timmy, Coyote.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
I would like to ask Pastor this question. What are you doing to actually reach people outside church? You know, social media, taking the church out of the church. What are you doing as a pastor to reach them? That's as in church without words.
Very good question, Mark. Thank you. You know that anybody who knows me for a little bit knows that I'm an advocate of taking church out of church. And my scripture is that everywhere he went, he was doing good. We're speaking about Jesus Christ. And what church has done, which has been a little bit not quite okay, especially Pentecostal church, is that it has brought people into church, kept them into church, and pounded them in church. When I first became born again, one of the things we used to hear is, be separate and remove yourselves from amongst them. What has Belial got to do with light? What has sin got to do with darkness? And then they brought us out of church and they told us to be praying, to be fasting, and to be doing all the spiritual efforts and things like that. And then we'll go out there in the world and everything should be okay. We did all that, but we came to the world and found that our places had been taken, where nothing was okay. The economy wasn't working. Bad boys had taken over the government and they were now telling us what to do, and so on and so forth. So we said to ourselves, we needed to change our thinking. We needed to get people involved as Christians, as church people, in things that didn't seem traditional church. So we got people playing football, we got people going into the hospitals, we started what we call care clinic, and so on and so forth. Every night now, my wife wakes up about 1 a.m. and goes out talking to women of easy virtue, carries a bus, helps them, puts them in the bus, gives them little bits of money, gets them to come to church. Wonderful testimonies of people. One almost got killed, the other day, just as my wife was talking to her, and she says, no, she's going to go with that man. And the man draws up. My wife says, don't go, come. She goes off with the man, only for the man to want to actually kill her. Okay, so she had to jump out of the car and run out of the man's car and so on and so forth. So there are great testimonies of now taking the goodness of God and meeting the people on the streets. Okay, so we have community church where we go to the communities and meet with the people. And we also now have political church. What are we trying to do? Get into politics, get into leadership, go there and make a difference. Okay, go there and campaign right, go there and don't give bribes, go there and don't receive bribes, go there and they say, no, we may not win. You don't need to win, but set a standard. Okay, if you don't win today, you win tomorrow. If you don't win tomorrow, you win the day after. Show the difference between this and that. And now specifically with technology and the sort of thing that we're now trying to do, we're now taking church into the airwaves, into the social media, into tweets, into blogs, into this and that, so that we can get the interest of as many people as possible.
Okay. Larry, your question.
Well, I think Mark's question had sort of cued my question, because I was going to ask, is there a balancing act between our lives as Christians and what we do from a leadership standpoint, and specifically politically? Because I think one of the challenges that we faced as a country, I mean, over the last decade and a half, is that we haven't had the best of leaders, right? So we have huge resources, we have amazing talent, but this hasn't transcended or translated, to amazing development, right? And the mindset, and I think the mindset is changing with the younger generation, but the mindset for a long time was, just pray about it. But it's not just enough to pray about it. What are the actionables? What are the things Christians can begin to do to start to affect, leadership from politics, right? And we don't have enough of such Christians, even in politics, right, from the local government chairman right up to the president. But I think this is something that the church has to start to consider. But I mean, just traditionally, we haven't been in that position. I mean, what would the pastor have to say about that?
Very good question also. The first thing that the Christian has to do is to be a Christian, is to be a real and true Christian.
How do you become a real and true Christian, apart from being born again?
You're born again, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
Then there's the Word of God. Okay. Joshua chapter 1 verse 8. Okay. This book of the law will not depart out of your mouth. You will meditate therein day and night. It's very, very tough to be a Christian and a true Christian in this environment. Not plain lip service to the word Christian. Okay. You want to follow the teachings of Christ. You want to be humble. You want to be holy. You want to avoid sin. You want to speak right. You want to think before you talk. You want to truly fear God, and so on and so forth. And it involves, okay, what we call delayed gratification, living well within your means, okay. there's nothing wrong with being ambitious to make money, but not to make money to spend it all on yourself and do all the razzmatazz that people think, but to make the money so that you can make life better for other people. It means that for you to do that, you must be ready to pay your taxes correctly, which a lot of us don't do. You must be ready to live within your means. You must be ready not to be flamboyant. You must be ready to do things small, 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 so that people have nothing to use against you. People cannot bribe you or threaten you or challenge you or say that you have mislocated or misappropriated. But a lot of us Christians, we don't bring ourselves down. There's too much desire to live a good lifestyle, the breakthrough Christianity. So even though we're coming to church, we're praying, we're praising God, we're breaking little rules, okay? It's a Christian that will drive one way, the opposite way. It's a Christian that will throw litter on the floor. I have come to checkpoints and I've had to separate flights between Christian and the police, shouting on the police and so on and so forth. Is a Christian that will not pay their correct taxes. Is a Christian that you've been arrested by LASMA, and I must tell you, it's very tough, okay? You are rushing for a meeting, LASMA has caught you, okay, and they are making insinuations to you and so on. So it's tough. So
you just give.
And you try and solve your problem, you know. But if you're really going to be a game changer, you must be ready. It's a lot of sacrifice in this environment, okay? And then once you've done that, then you want to get involved. But you want to get involved playing it according to your own rules, knowing that it's not do or die, okay? A lot of people have said to me, go into politics and all that. Yeah, no problem, okay? But for me, it's not do or die, because I'm going in there to serve, okay? And you better need my service and be willing to take my service, because I'm not going into politics to steal anything. God is helping me. I'm doing good business. He's providing for me. I'm trying to live within my lifestyle and so on and so forth. So I have no real desire or demand. There's nothing materially that would interest me. So I'm going in there to serve. I'm going to do my best to convince you that you can use my service. And if you're not interested in my service, no problem. If you want to vote for Jack Nicholson, the armed robber down the road, no problem. You win this year, put you through grief for 4 years, and then maybe then you realize that this man just wants to serve and wants to make life better for other people.
So how do you, or rather, let me put it another way. Why is it so difficult to find the people that someone like yourself will describe as a true Christian aspiring for political office? Why is it so difficult?
It's difficult because we all go to the same market. We all have the same senses, okay? I love your jacket, okay? I don't know how much it costs, but it'd be nice for me to also wear a nice jacket like this, and so on and so forth. So for you to be a true Christian, you must not be covetous. You must really live within your means. But then there are challenges, okay? I mean, imagine here you are, God forbid, your son is ill, you know, like the story that the VP was sharing with us a few days ago. Your son is ill, okay? You don't have money to fix your son, and here you are trying to be a true Christian, and you work in customs, you need 35,000 naira, you know. He was telling us the story of a judge, okay, whose child was ill, and she needed 35,000 naira to fix that child, okay, and she was trying to be really ethical and all that, but the child was ill, and she didn't have 35,000, and then lo and behold, the gentleman whose case was before her realized that she needed 35,000 and says, well, if you need 35,000, I'm willing to give you because your son is ill. Okay? Now, it was a real moral debate for this lady to say, what do I do? You're going to stand before me tomorrow. I have to judge your case. Now, you're offering me 35,000. I didn't ask you, but my child is ill. Okay? Those challenges come before us all the time. Now, what do? Do you accept his 35,000 and then tomorrow he stands before you and is looking at you and says, yes, George, you know, 35,000. It's tough, okay? So these are real life issues that challenge our faith and our Christianity. So if you're going to be a Christian, you must be ready. You must be prepared. for all these things, okay? And the world out there is very, very funny. I know of a man of God, who very, very critical, very, very open, very, very challenging the forces. So you know what they did? They took him to England. When he got to England, put him in a very nice hotel. Then after a while, sent two lovely ladies to go and look after him all by himself. And then they filmed it. And there he was. So by the time he came back to Nigeria and started wanting to talk, they just called him into a little room and they showed him a little video of him in a nice, lovely hotel in London with two ladies. It's very tough. So for you to run this race, you must be mentally prepared that even though he slay me, yet did I love him. And Esther said, if I perish, I perish. It's very, very difficult for people to push themselves to that state because of the desires of life that we all have, legitimate desires of life.
Okay. There's a question I would want to raise, but I'll leave it till later. So let's go to Alima. Do you have another question?
Not for now.
Okay. All right. Favor?
Anu?
Yes, Anu.
Sorry? You're breaking. Can you?
Okay.
Gay marriage is legalized. All the states in the U.S. Wow. It's tough, and I know you said something very germane in that the church is sleeping, and the church is not doing what the church needs to do, and the church has been sleeping for a long time. And the Bible says that while men slept, the devil came to his field and sowed tares, and this is exactly what is happening. Gay, without any, I have no apologies whatsoever. It's totally against the natural laws of life, and it's totally against the spiritual laws of life. If you are gay, there's something wrong somewhere, either spiritually or mentally or emotionally. It is absolutely not right. And for anybody to now want to make what is wrong to be right, because that is how they are, is totally out of it. And I must tell you clearly that any society that begins to condone all these sort of things is on its way to decline. You know, the Roman Empire was one of the greatest empires in the world at a certain time. But the Roman Empire didn't go on decline because the soldiers were weak. It didn't go on decline because the armory was short. It didn't go on decline because the economy was bad. It went on decline because there was huge morass in the society. Gays started coming in, prostitution, drunkenness, revelry, and all that kind of thing. And before you knew it, it had gone. So any society that begins to condone these things, like Sodom and Gomorrah, it is actually on the decline. There's nothing you can do about it. Because these things are against the spiritual laws and they're against the natural laws. And one of the things you said, Anu, is that they are taking over everywhere. Okay? I was telling people in church the other day about dressing and dressing well. And one of the things we want to do is to have a Christian or ethical fashion show. You can be fashionable, but you don't need to expose your body. And I said these things that young boys are wearing, they call it shag or whatever it is, the trousers falling down. I think it's actually prisoners that wear that kind of dress, okay? It's just one of the things that society tries to do to impose a lot of nonsense and make it look like proper sense or fashionable, okay? And that's what happens in society, okay? They try to bring out evil and sell it to innocent people, and these innocent people who just desire some kind of leadership buy it hook, line, and center. The church or the real Christian must respond. Okay, we must take over the airwaves like channels. Okay, take it over completely. STV, DSTV. Okay, and from those channels or from those points of view, the newspapers, everything, keep influencing people from a positive point of view. But then when you have the people of a lower kind of thinking being in charge and imposing their thoughts on other people, this is the kind of thing you get.
Okay, just before we go to the next person, I would want to ask you, in the United States of America, there are churches that are spirit-filled. What has happened to those churches to make it such that right before their very eyes, with them having 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 members in their church, and you have a church that can seat 30, 50,000, almost like a stadium, and yet these kind of things are happening where they're legalizing gay marriage in their own, right before their own eyes. Do they not believe the same thing you believe?
They do, but that's part of the challenge in that the church is not playing its role for many reasons. Okay, some of these churches, even the pastors, I dare say, are not standing the way they should stand. The churches might be doing well, filled with people, but the pastors are not standing the way they will stand. There's a cobweb here, there's something here, there's something there. Sometimes I say to some of my colleagues, we're more interested in empire building than actually speaking truth to power. You know, the role of the church is, number one, to bless the people. Number two, to encourage them and teach them the way of the Lord. Number three, to speak truth to power. The reason why Israel kept on making mistakes and rising was because there was a strong church that believed in God and spoke truth to power. When David slept with Bathsheba, it was the church, Nathan, the priest, that came and said, David, you've messed up. Nathan spoke very politely, told him a parable, but at the end of the day, he says, thou art the man. Okay? Now you would not find many churches in Nigeria or in America or in Britain going to the prime minister and say that economic policy is totally out of whack. That policy on gay marriage, you have not heard from God. And God is saying this and that and the other. These things you people are doing in Nigeria, God has not, you have not heard from God. Very, very few people do that. Why? Instead, they court government. Okay, they become friends with the leader. They get favors from the leader. A gift here, a gift there, piece of land there, piece of land there. They threaten to lock up your church, blah, blah, blah. So you make friends with the leaders, and then you are not able to speak truth to power. So you must, if you are going to be a true leader, be able at any point in time to speak truth to power and say what you have heard from God. And this is the challenge now in church. Some churches now, they don't want to speak too much against gay people because gay people have now come into church. They're probably the biggest tithers, probably the biggest check writers, as in politics, okay? Obama himself, with all the respect I have for him, had to kowtow to gay people because he knows that they're very powerful, very rich, and they command influence, okay? And it's just so ironic or interesting that somehow evil seems to thrive. They seem to make a lot of money. They seem to have a lot of influence. But Proverbs says, don't be envious of the evil person because you don't know what his end is going to be.
Okay, all right. Larry, your turn.
Okay. So my second question has to do with again, it's just balancing your professional and your Christian life. So I'll just give a classic example. So I had the opportunity to do grad school in the US, and I remember one of the challenges I had was being irregular on Sundays in church, and the reason being, Sundays for me were the most lucrative days to work, to do my second job as a student, to pay for my tuition, blah, blah, blah. and it was a challenge because I would not be regular in church, and I wanted to. Again, I probably see that pattern as a professional now, where work would take me out of the country, blah blah blah, and as a result, I'm not as regular as I want to in church. What are the kind of, I mean, what kind of advice would you provide as a pastor to people who have this sort of jobs? Not that they're sitting down at home and not being in church on Sunday, but just by the nature of their jobs, they're not as regular as they should be. What are the kind of things that that they can do to make sure that they're still devout Christians?
Okay.
That's a good one. You need to know what your priorities are, okay? And let me be the first to say that church is not the only mode of worship of God, okay? But it's good to go to church. It's good to share fellowship with people. It's good to praise and worship God together. It's good to hear the word of God from somebody who is also studying that word of God. And if you can devote like 2 hours every week to church, I'm sure that you can forsake 2 hours worth of wages or whatever money it is just to spend time with God. And the truth of the matter is that what you do in prayer in 5 minutes, you might find yourself doing it in work in 3 days. Okay? A 5-minute prayer, a 5-minute time with God will sort out your 7 days amount of work, and so on and so forth. And it has happened to me in my own life. So you just need to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You need to be disciplined and plan your time well. 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week in God's presence, I don't think is too much, regardless of what kind of money that you're looking for and what you need the money for. And you need to do that. If you travel a lot also, you need to carry your God with you wherever you go. There was a time I traveled also, but I planned my travel around church. Okay, I plan my travel around church. I don't travel on Sundays, for instance, and it's not on Sunday morning, except it's absolutely essential. I rarely travel on Wednesdays also, except it's absolutely essential. Okay, but then again, if you miss 1 or 2, 3 or 4, you have not committed any serious crime, but you must know where your focus is, and those times with God are very, very important.
So what about places or organizations where it's not about the money, it's just the fact that they won't just give you the free time to go away and say you're going to church?
Then what you want to do is that those organizations are temporary. They must not become your permanent kind of.
Are you insinuating that resign from that job, get another one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if a job would not allow you to worship God, then there's something wrong with that job. It's like saying that a job would not allow you to go home at night to sleep. Then you say you want to continue the job. Any job that's a good job, a decent job, must create time for you to have time for the things that are important to you. Otherwise, what is the essence of life? You've not come to this world to be under bondage. Okay, this is for freedom that God has set you free. Okay, so you must be able to work in an environment that gives you time to do the things that are important to you.
Okay. Our time is fast moving. We've got just a few minutes left, but before we go, we've just been joined by Sarah. Sarah, welcome to the Google Hangout with Pastor Itua. What will be your first question?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Earlier, Pastor was talking about speaking truth to power. Pastor was talking about speaking truth to power, and it's in the Bible in Romans 13, verse 1 to 6, that we should be submissive to the authorities. I just want Pastor to explain further about how we can speak truth to power in a way that we are not going to talk, that we are not going to be talking negative to power.
If truth is This is truth. What is true is true, okay? And you know, when you punish your child, you're not punishing to destroy, you are punishing to correct. So the motive of what you're saying is also important, okay? You are trying to tell this gentleman who is in power that what he has done is not correct or according to God's word. So there's a nice way of saying something that is true, okay? You don't go to the man, point your hands in his face, abuse him, tell him he's mad and crazy and all that. I mean, take Nathan, for instance, okay? David has slept with another man's wife, committed adultery, eventually had killed the man, and so on and so forth, and he was still king. So Nathan went to David's house, knocked on his door, and says, "Hey, king, I have a problem. I have a problem. You need to help me solve this problem." The king says, "No problem. What is the problem?" Says, "A gentleman came a few days ago, went into somebody's house, okay? He had a visitor, okay? And he had many goats in his house. But instead of taking any one of the goats in his house, went to his neighbor's house who had only one goat, seized the neighbor's goat because the neighbor was his servant, killed the goat, and offered the goat to the visitor." Says, "King, what do you think we should do to such a man?" And David says, without thinking, "What a terrible deed. How can you have many goats in your own house, then you go to somebody's house who has only one goat, you kill the goat?" Says, "Let that man come, I will deal with him, cut off his head, everything." Then Nathan says, "Well, by the way, you are the man. You are the man, you left all your wives, okay, and then went to somebody who has only one wife, and you take the man's wife, you have intercourse with her, and you didn't even stop at that, you killed the man." So David sat down and says, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize, I didn't think of it that way." So there's a way of speaking truth to power. You speak truth to power. First of all, you speak to them one-on-one. You don't want to embarrass them. And then you tell them the truth in the way the truth is. It doesn't mean that you are not still subject to them because they're in power. It doesn't mean that you are asking them to fall down and die. It doesn't mean that but you are telling them that, "Gentlemen, Obasanjo, Yaradua, Jonathan, that economic policy is not the will of God for Nigeria. Believe me sincerely, I heard from God. He can take it and he can leave it. But you have done what you are supposed to do."
Okay, we've got a few minutes left now. I keep referring to the fact that we've got a few minutes, so I'm going to take questions from each one of you. I'll take 3 at a time, and I will ask Pastor to make the responses very brief. This is your final set of questions, and in this case, your question has got to be maximum 10 to 15 seconds, no more. I will start with Nda, please. Nda, 10 seconds to ask a question.
Okay, Pastor. Pastor, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
That's
I
2 seconds.
want to ask, who have challenged your life in politics and in ministry? Do you have anyone that have challenged your life?
Okay, that's a challenge in life.
life.
Yes, Mark, your question.
Pastor, I would like to ask you this question. I know you do NGO, and you have a foundation, the Itua Ighodalo Foundation, and that gives annual award to best accounting students from Unilag, any university. I would like to ask you, can't you spread it wider rather than just keeping it just only in accounting? You could look at other fields too.
Thanks, Mark. All right, Larry, your final question. Or you spare Pastor and say, "Okay, don't worry, you should answer the other 2."
Well, I think I've asked 2 good questions, so I'll pass on this one.
Okay, all right then. We'll say answer that one, and then we'll take Favor, Alima, and Sarah.
Okay, good. The question about who has challenged me in life in terms of ministry and politics. Politically and leadership-wise, I have a great passion for Martin Luther King Jr. He laid down his life for what he believed in internationally. Also, Nelson Mandela laid down his life for what he believed in. And nearer home in Nigeria, Obafemi Awolowo did quite a lot. And in contemporary Nigeria, I have a lot of respect for Bola Tinubu. You can say whatever you like about him, but he's an extremely courageous politician. Good side, bad side, but extremely courageous politician. Okay. In terms of ministry, not too many people. A lot of people know that I served in Redeem, Adeboye, very inspirational leader. Also, T.D. Jakes, very, very good motivational speaker. And God bless his soul. God bless his soul. Miles Monroe, fantastic. Miles Monroe, fantastic. Okay, so that is that about leadership. In terms of Mark, accounting, you know, the Bible says that you preach the gospel in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. Now, accounting is my own Jerusalem. That's what I studied. So I started accounting, but also we desire to give prizes in leadership and politics. That's where my heart is. Okay, and of course, because you're an IT person, maybe one day we'll give a prize in IT. But we want to give prizes in everything. It's just resource based.
Okay. All right. Alima, okay, I'll start with Sarah. Last question, 10 seconds.
Okay. Yeah.
You've got 2 seconds left, Sarah, because we got to close now. 2 seconds. Summarize it. Okay. All right. Anu, your question. Favor. Okay. And then last question from. Okay, we've got Alima.
For the world, as in right now we're facing a lot of religious fundamentalism and persecution. What message do you have for even the Muslims that are being persecuted, Christians persecuted all over the world?
Okay.
Very good. Very, very good questions. Let me start with Halima because that's the one I remember. Persecution. Okay, it's very tough being persecuted, but it's one of the things that happens to a true Christian. Of all the 12 or 11 apostles that were left, only Peter died in old age. Sorry, John, the beloved, died in old age. And even then, he had been put in a pot of boiling oil. So persecution will come if you believe in the right thing. So you need to be ready for it and try your best. The book that I read that inspired me when I started off in my career, to be honest, I can't remember. I must be very, very honest with you. But I've had some very inspirational books. I've read the Life and Times of Afemi Awolowo. I've read Mustafa Mind Drunkard. Very, very interesting satire about life. But more recently, there's a book that talks about Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. It's a very excellent book. I recommend it to most people, and lots of other books. And Nelson Mandela's Walk to Freedom.
Freedom. What about the question from, I think it was Sarah that asked about marriage, career woman, and how you manage your career and being in marriage. So that's pretty much like work-family balance.
Yes. Every person must strike that balance eventually, even if you have to go through a season where you are doing more of one than the other. You must afterward pull yourself back and have that balance. So whatever you do, let it be temporary so that very soon you can decide on how you want to spend your time.
Okay, we want to say thank you very much to Pastor Itua Ighodalo. He is the senior pastor at the Trinity House, and we thank you for sparing your time. And we want to say thank you to all of you who have joined us, Lima, Favor, Lanre, Sarah, who joined later, Mark, and Nda. And I understand there is someone who logged in as a project manager who joined us not many seconds ago. But for all of you, we say thank you. And for those who are just watching on YouTube, don't worry, the program will be put together and we'll broadcast it at some point. And we will promote it so that you get to see this again. Though at that point, you will not be able to ask any question. You'll just be able to learn from the fountain of knowledge and blessing that God has put on the life of Pastor Itua. Pastor, thank you very much. It's been great having you here at Channels Television for this Google Hangout.
Thank you very much, Kade. I really appreciate you guys.
And as you're going, what will be your final word on Nigeria? You know where we've been, and we said we want a change. Now we've got a change, and we are having people throwing punches in the National Assembly. Is this the change we wanted?
It's not, but it's part of the process. And it's like the rot suddenly coming out again. So we can now deal with it once and for all, and then face where we're going.
So this is part of the process of change.
It's part of the process of change.
Again, thank you very much, Pastor.
Thank you, Kade. God bless you.
My name is Kade Akintemi. It's been great having you here. And this is where we say it's a wrap on this Google Hangout with Pastor Itua Ighodalo. Thank you, and see you again soon.
See you all.